Hello and welcome back to Recipe to Revenue. I am so excited to be here today with Denise Ramon. She is the owner of Two Sisters Salsa based in Louisiana. And I'm excited because today we're going to talk about something we haven't talked about on the show before, and that is buying a CPG brand. And Denise has an interesting story about how she started in the industry and came into this brand. And we're going to hear all about how she is growing it and the things that she's doing to make Two Sisters a household name. So, Denise, welcome.
Thank you, Leah. Excited to be on here. I appreciate you inviting me. So I'll just jump right in. I've been with the company going on 8 years now. I started basically as an account rep, moved into a sales manager role, became president of the company, and then fast forward 8 years later, actually bought the company last month.
Oh,
So super exciting. Our
very exciting.
founder is still going to hold on to the manufacturing side of it. So he'll do all the
Hmm.
manufacturing. His bandwidth was pretty maxed. He's a big farmer. He does the production facility. He's a pilot, and then I'm going to handle all the sales side of it. So really continuing to grow the brand, being a little more diversified. I have some exciting ideas, challenges, goals that I'm going to take on. So yes, very exciting times.
Yeah, absolutely. So tell us about, so you've been with the brand for 8 years. So tell us about how you got started in it and what kind of sales role, what was your sales role
So
like?
when I first joined the company, obviously we're a 10-year brand, born 10
Hmm.
years ago. Central South Louisiana started with the company, and it was just basically our number one goal was to get into retailers. So, we were
Hmm.
already in several warehouses. We had just gotten into Walmart. And then I launched us into Kroger and a host of other different warehouses. So the goal when we first got started was, we would literally call grocery stores one at a time, letting them know about our
Hmm.
promotions. Then we started partnering with brokers. So we had brokers helping us. So there's been since the start, I guess each stage had looked a little different. In other words.
Yeah. Yeah, I love hearing that journey because I think a lot of people, when they're starting out and they're, especially when they're trying to get into retail, they go that route of phone call by phone call and trying to develop those relationships. And then they say, oh, maybe we should get a broker to help us do this. This is a lot of work. So,
Yes,
did you have
definitely.
experience doing this before, or were you learning as you came onto the brand and was making those calls?
My background, I have a sales background since college, so
Hmm.
definitely used to calling on businesses, developing
Hmm.
relationships, but I did not have any CPG experience prior to this. So it was
Yeah.
very new, challenging. You make mistakes, you learn from them, you hope you don't make them again. So yeah,
Hmm.
it's I have some interesting stories. We were calling this one group, just their individual stores. We didn't know we weren't supposed to, but we know we needed orders. We needed it. You're living and dying up by your POs.
Yeah.
So we started calling store by store, just basically letting them know, look, we're running this promotion right now. Your
Hmm.
store is included in it. Wanted to see if you guys would like to book some cases of salsa. Well,
Yeah.
evidently it got to their category manager. And so he cut our brand out of the store, and I'd only been with the company a
Oh,
short
wow.
period of time. I didn't know that was like, not you're not supposed to do that.
Yeah.
So I called him, picked up the phone, called him. I was like, "I am so
Mhm.
sorry. We had no idea. When can we get back into your store?" And he was like, "Call
Mhm.
me in 3 years." So
Oh my
literally on the
goodness.
3rd year I called, but that was a lesson. I was like, "All right, we're
Wow.
never," especially some groups will allow you to do that, some they don't
Mhm.
want you doing that. So
Yeah,
literally
you
on the
offended him. Yeah, like, wow. So did you just, put a note in your calendar, call back in 3 years?
I did, and he still
Oh,
remembers, he still brings it up. He's like, "Don't ever call my
really?
stores." I was like, "I promise I will never call your stores again. I will go directly
Wow.
through you." It wasn't like I was trying to, not follow his
Yeah,
wishes,
not
but
trying to circumvent him. Yeah,
just
just you
did
didn't
not
know.
realize that it was that,
Yeah.
that was an issue. So it's
Yeah,
those type of
wow.
things where it's trial and error. You learn,
Mhm.
you definitely don't wanna make that mistake again.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. So as you were starting to get some of those first orders in retail, what was that experience like, and how did you, like, align your manufacturing with the sales that you were doing?
Yeah, I mean, you definitely have highs and lows. It's kind of like a scramble. You work, 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 and then you're like, we got a PO and work, work,
Mhm.
work. So in the beginning, it's definitely hard to forecast. So we have a 2-year shelf life on the product. So
Yeah.
we thankfully, even through COVID, we never had a supply chain issue. Um,
Mhm.
he would buy a lot of the inputs and different things like that to ensure that we had that product, especially because the forecast kind of sometimes at the beginning was up and down,
Mhm.
peaks
Yeah.
and
And
valleys.
right, right, yeah, and it's really hard, like you said, to forecast that, but also to manage, just the day-to-day business of it, of do you have money coming in or not, especially in those early days. But it's interesting that the former owner was also the farmer, correct?
He is
So
a big farmer in Central Louisiana, so, what was a positive was he was able to outsource fresh produce. So our salsa is
mhm,
everything in the jar is clean label, it's made with all fresh produce, so he has a lot of contacts in that farming
mhm,
world, to where,
yeah,
he can go and get the fresh tomatoes, the jalapenos, the onions. So, yes,
yeah,
it was definitely it is beneficial.
yeah, yeah, to be kind of on the inside of that. And are you getting your produce from Louisiana or from other parts of the US or overseas as well?
Everything is sourced within the US. We do get some of the fresh produce in our home state of Louisiana.
Mhm,
The tomatoes, we outsource those out of state, but
mhm.
everything is sourced down to the jar in the US, which has been good, especially with the tariffs.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. That's a big plus for you guys.
Yes.
So you were growing the brand, getting it into more retail, and as you kind of moved up in your positions in the company, how did your perspective change of where the brand could go?
Um, Very quickly, I realized the more relationships that you have with the right person, which is category managers, store owners, that sort of thing. The more beneficial it was because if we got into a group, if they were doing a salsa review, we get into a group. Being a newer brand, we're not like a Pace or a Tostitos where we've been around for
Mhm.
hundreds of years. A lot of times, your
Yeah.
relationship is key. That's one of the main things. They're giving you a lot of
Mhm.
grace with your product. They're giving you tips. And, I'm not going to say all of them were like that because some of them were like, all right, I'm going to
Mhm.
put you in the set. It's sink or swim. So you had to do a
Yeah.
lot of networking. And so it really puts things into perspective. You're not just calling on grocery stores now. You're actually, flying to Bentonville, Arkansas, sitting in front of the Walmart buyer and
Yeah.
you're trying to relate and get that connection with her, type of
Yeah.
thing, or with another buyer at another group. So, yeah, I would
Mhm.
definitely say, a big part of it was face-to-face relationships, and that was a challenge
Mhm.
too during COVID because a lot of things shut
Yeah.
down. So,
Right.
we went to really launch our brand, meaning move our brokers aside and us be the face of the company, and then COVID hit. And when COVID
Mm.
hit, obviously, the world shut down. Everybody went home. It was Teams calling,
Yeah.
and you kinda lost that intimate one-on-one relationship with that buyer. So, we
Yeah.
had to really do some different strategic things to help close the gap on that. Thankfully, grocery stores were thriving and business was really good because everything else
Mhm.
closed during that time.
Right. Yeah, there was really nothing else to spend your money on besides food.
Right. But, as far as building that relationship and
Mhm.
that type of thing, that was a little bit of a challenge, but now I feel like, one of the first things when we get into a new group or warehouse or whatever that looks like is you wanna develop that relationship with that category manager, know what their expectations are,
Mhm.
not only for them, but for their category. What does that
Yeah.
look like?
Yeah, yeah, those are, yeah, great advice there. So I want you to talk a little bit about the broker experience, why you decided to work with one, and then it sounds like then you brought it back in-house. Is that correct?
Yeah, so I'll give you a snapshot of what that looked like. When I first joined the company, we had a pretty wide range of brokers that represented our
Mhm.
brand on pretty much every level. And their brokers are great.
Mhm.
because they act as a liaison between you and the buyer, right? So they're in, whether it's a couple of groups or maybe they just call on one big group, they're in there
Mhm.
all the time. They know the lingo, the language, they're repping other products. For
Right.
us, we got to a point right near COVID where we're like, okay, we need to
Mhm.
move the brokers aside and we need to really learn about this industry, right? Like
Mhm.
we need to be the face of our brand first and make sure that it's scaling and getting to where it needs to be. Then we'll bring the brokers back in when it's the right time.
Mhm.
Not that they were doing anything to hurt the brand, but they rep so
Mhm.
many other products that if a brand isn't doing that well, they're only gonna stick their neck out so far because they
Yeah.
have all these other
Right.
brands, right? And
Right.
there's only so much time in their defense too. So for a while, it was
Mhm.
hard for me to understand, like, if we would get cut from a category, from a group, like,
Mhm.
"Well, why didn't you help us?" Or, just it was a little
Yeah.
frustrating. And that
Yeah.
now I see their position, they're
Mhm.
not us, they're not me, they're not the face of
Right.
the company, they're basically a liaison, and they're repping a lot of other brands. So,
Yeah.
I would say to any brand that's starting out, you wanna make sure you have a solid footing in whatever group you have, and then go get that
Mhm.
broker. Um, and then at some point, we're starting to bring brokers back in. So,
Mhm.
but that's pretty much been our plan. We kinda had to learn that the hard way a little bit. It's like, when is
Yeah.
the right time to bring that broker back in? So that
Right. Right.
and to me, that's when the brand is really established and moving those units per store per week and meeting all those objectives for that particular group and buyer.
Mhm. And are you using them strategically to get into certain markets or into certain retailers?
And that yes, to answer your question, yes,
Yeah.
we have used them. A lot of times, I would say buyers, category managers, they want you with a broker before they'll take you in.
Yeah.
Sometimes it doesn't matter. They wanna know your brand, what your objectives
Mhm.
are, how can you help their category? But
Mhm.
yes, we have used brokers before in the past to, help us get into groups.
Yeah. I wanna go back to something you mentioned earlier about, Walmart. What was it like preparing for that meeting?
It was exciting, I would say all the things, right? Exciting,
Mhm.
nerve-wracking, you just wanna make sure you're checking all the boxes when you go to Walmart
Yeah.
because they're the top tier, right? And then everything
Mhm.
else is underneath. But yeah, we have a great broker with Walmart, and
Mhm.
she's just Walmart, so she really
'Kay.
helped and prepared us for that. So,
Yeah.
and then just to go there, is just so exciting and
Mhm.
rewarding, to know that you've made it into Walmart with your
Yeah.
brand. That's kinda I don't wanna say the easy part. The hard part is, okay, how am I gonna stay on that shelf? How am I gonna
Yes.
get those turns? So, uh, yes, very exciting.
I think, yeah, a lot of brand owners would agree with you, and I've heard that from multiple people, especially recently, is, yeah, getting to the stores is not really the biggest challenge here. It's staying on the shelves.
Yes.
Um, so that brings me to my next question about what have you done as a brand to support your retail sales? Because it's very different than doing your own e-commerce site and how you do that type of marketing.
Yeah, the biggest thing for us, from the get-go is running promotions in the store. So
Mhm.
we heavily I always say when I talk to people about, what are we doing to grow our brand, right?
Mhm.
And to move the needle. And I always say, there's several buckets with CP, I feel like with any brand. First, obviously you want to have a great quality product. Then you want
Mhm.
to get it into retail. Then you want to make sure it's turning and scaling. The biggest thing for us is running promotions. Right now, I feel like a lot of people are price conscious, so they're
Mhm.
watching, is this on sale, or they're
Yeah.
comparing prices. They're not necessarily looking at a brand loyalty, but they're looking
Mhm.
at, what is this price versus this price. So we're doing a very good job of making sure because we are a premium salsa, but we're not
Mhm.
priced way out of the market of a salsa.
Mhm.
So we're
Yeah.
being super conscientious on the price, so we're running promotions. We're also trying to make sure that, before the customer walks into the store, that they know about our product. So we've really ramped up our
Mhm.
efforts as far as brand awareness goes, social
Yeah.
media, marketing, PR awareness. You can dip with the salsa, but you can also cook with it, leading
Mhm.
them into our website to get recipes, that type of thing.
Yeah. Yeah. How much, tastings have you done to build up the brand awareness?
That is another thing too. We're to grow our brand awareness, we're doing in-store sampling.
Yeah.
It
It's
is
I feel especially with salsa, you wanna know the texture, you wanna see, the flavor, if it's smoky or not, if it has that more like celery feel to it or yeah, I lived in New Mexico for 14 years, so salsa, we've tried a lot and have very specific opinions about what we like, but,
right. No,
you
the
know
the key is if you can get your customer to try it, then you're
yeah.
gonna turn them, and we feel very confident that, we have a
Mhm.
premium quality product. If we can get it in
Yeah.
their mouths, then they're gonna be loyal to our product, and so now we're
Mhm.
starting to build that loyalty. So, we did some demos right out the bat when we first started, and then COVID hit,
Mhm.
so all of that went away. So, it was like,
Yeah.
"Okay, how do we get to this customer?" How do we get them to
Right.
try our brand? Now, sampling, demos are coming back, so we're
Mhm.
actually this year, one of my main goals is to get out and even myself personally and hire brand ambassadors to
Mhm.
demo our brand, whether it's at a sporting event, whether it's in
Yeah.
store where we sell the product, because that's what's going to really turn your customer, into a loyal follower.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And do you partake in any partnership marketing as part of your marketing activities?
Yes, that's a great question. We did in the past. We're doing it right now, and then we want to do more of it moving forward. And that's finding a
Yeah.
complementary product that we can
Mhm.
promote with our brand. So you can cook
Yeah.
with it. So some of the things we've done in the past is pair with a cheese. Buy
Yeah.
two sister salsa, buy this cheese dip, and you get a bag of chips free.
Right.
And then at the grocery
Mhm.
store, you're building that basket fill too. So if we
Mhm.
can convince, the retailer to put us in a display, so it's salsa, it's chips, it's cheese, it could be tortillas and
Yeah.
jalapenos, we've just
Mhm.
built an entire meal. It could be
Yeah.
nachos or something along those lines
Queso, yeah.
with all these products. So definitely, making sure we're co-merchandising with other products is a
Mhm.
big deal for us, and the
Yeah.
stores and the buyers as well.
Mhm. Mhm. Absolutely. All right, so I wanna go back to, your story of to the point where you took over the business, and then we can come back to some branding, tips that I think you have for us today. Uh, so as you were moving up the ranks of the company and then the former owner, did he come to you first and say, I'm you thinking of selling, or how did it play out that you were
We
handed the
had
reins?
Yeah, so we had talked just in conversation about it a little bit.
Hmm.
His bandwidth was maxed. He's running
Hmm.
our production facility. He's a
Yeah.
farmer. He's actually a pilot. I had ideas on how I wanted to grow the brand and what I think we could
Hmm.
do differently or just added value, just different things like that. So one day, yes, he came to me and he was like, "Look, I think it's a great idea that you buy the sales side of it. That way you can put all these ideas into
Hmm.
action." And for
Yeah.
me, it's it's been basically, my passion for the last 8 years. So, of course, it was
Hmm.
very easy for me to say yes. Yeah, there's a
Yeah.
lot of risk, but with risk, there's reward too.
Sure.
So I went all in, bought the company, and it's been a month, but I do have a lot of great ideas on the direction of where I wanna bring the brand. Obviously, I know we need to do a better job of brand awareness. Even though for 10
Hmm.
years, I feel like we've been doing stuff. We had an
Hmm.
article, that a local regional newspaper put out about us, and the whole label refresh. We just did a major label refresh on the brand. We also, the new
Hmm.
ownership, and we're in our
Hmm.
10-year anniversary, so it all kinda incorporated everything in the paper. Well,
Yeah.
once it hit social media and I started sharing it, it was just very interesting to hear and see the people that have never heard about our product right here in our
Hmm.
hometown. So
Yeah.
anyway, that was an eye opener for me to say, okay, I need to take a better initiative on building more of this brand awareness. We want to get diversified, do some food service packaging, some private labeling,
Mm,
e-commerce that also builds brand awareness.
yeah.
So for me, it's very exciting, all these different ideas, challenges, that type of thing.
Mhm. Yeah, no, it's exciting times, and it's such a great point where now you've had all these ideas for years, and it sounds like you've been able to do a lot of them, but now you have the reins to go in whatever direction that you see
Yes,
fit.
that's exactly it.
And how did the team that you have feel about the transition? They
Everybody was very supportive. The
Cool.
brokers were very supportive, family,
Mhm.
friends. So,
Yeah,
just haven't looked back, and we have our eye on continuing to grow the brand. So it is very
yeah,
exciting, very rewarding, and like I said, obviously there's challenges along the way, but
sure.
you figure it out, and you keep moving
Mhm.
along.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. What has been a surprise or two that it's only been a month, so maybe we'll have to come back and have this conversation again next year. But any big surprises in taking over the top leadership role yet?
I mean, really, I was basically our founder and I had this conversation not too long ago. I always had that
Yeah,
mindset like this was my business. I kind of ran it.
yeah,
So from
hmm
that perspective, like it's still, still the grind, and
yeah,
we're not letting up, but it's just now it's your money, it's your personal
hmm
investment. So you pay attention to all of these different things like expenses,
yeah,
deductions. Not that I wasn't before, but
hmm
now that it's your money, you're like, okay, wait a minute, let's make sure this makes sense. And
yeah,
then just the cost to build the brand, what does it
yeah,
take? You can't just put a couple of posts on Facebook once
right,
a week and expect a brand to scale, right? So
yeah,
how are you going to do this or continue to work towards scaling this brand? And it
hmm
definitely comes with a cost. I will say that. So it's making sure that
yeah,
you have everything else aligned. Does everything else that you're spending make sense? Are you putting all of you know your emphasis in the correct places, right? I always call them
hmm
these buckets, but it's like, make sure you're doing things the right way that makes sense. I would say I'm pretty hyper focused more on that than I was before.
Yeah, yeah, I'm sure. Yeah, and I love your point about just taking a look at the numbers a little bit more closely because it's coming out of your pocket. It just kind of hits differently. So,
Absolutely. You have promotions, you have payroll, you have broker
hmm
fees, it's like it's real time, and you're in your QuickBooks and you're like, okay, like,
yeah,
how are we going to make all this happen? But
all right,
ultimately you do, and you know, it works out.
yeah, yeah, yes, just keep moving forward, right?
Yes.
Um, so, in terms of growing a brand, some do's and don'ts. What are some things that come to mind? Let's start with the do's.
The do's are, definitely you want to make sure you have a quality product, right? And
Hmm
the way you do that is you're listening to your buyers, you're listening to your customers. So, you want to make sure any tweaks along the way, whether it's packaging, we kept hearing about our packaging that it's blending in with the shelf. And so after a
Mm,
while, we're like, okay, we have to do something. And so grateful we
yeah.
did. We have this great new, vibrant, bright colored packaging.
hmm
Another do would be make sure you have good relationships with your category managers, your buyers, obviously your brokers. If you're not seeing, and this is just like real time, if there's a lax, this is a do. It could be a do and a don't. If you're seeing,
Yeah.
if you start seeing a trend where you're not getting POs, that's a huge red
hmm
flag. I'll pick up the phone and call them and say, okay, what do I need to do differently? What am I doing
Yeah.
now? What are other brands doing? So it's just trying to figure out the piece of that puzzle. And it
Right.
could be something like, look, when you ran the promotion last time, Pace was running right along with you and they were a dollar cheaper. So maybe you need to run
hmm
it in a different time frame. Don't run it on Super Bowl week or something like that.
Yeah.
So that would be a do. It's just to stay super involved and connected with your broker, your category manager.
hmm
Don't I would say definitely don't just um, go with your broker. You know, if you feel like you need
Mhm.
more information, step out of that realm and get in touch with that other person, that category manager.
Yeah.
Continue to run promotions, and then, social media for me, for our
Mhm.
brand, that's where it's at. Make sure you're heavily involved in social media. I would say all
Mhm.
platforms. I heavily network on
Mhm.
LinkedIn from the business aspect. And then to
Yeah.
hit my customer base, you'll want to know who your customer base is. That way you can really hone in on your product with them. So, just off the
Mhm.
top of my head, those are a few.
Yeah. Those are great, yeah. And on the don't side, what comes to mind?
The don't side is if something isn't working, like you want to get out in front of that and fix it very quickly. I'll give
Mhm.
you an example. This is real time. So I won't say who, but
Mhm.
we had a warehouse. It was a chain, and we did not get a PO. We were getting POs, but they were missing one SKU, and we kind of overlooked that for several months. It was like,
Okay.
they were ordering all these other SKUs, but they weren't ordering this one SKU. Um,
Mhm.
Anyway, it was because it got turned off and the product that they did have just sat in their warehouse. They wasn't shipping from their warehouse to
Oh.
the stores because it was turned
Oh.
off. It was an accident.
Yeah.
We didn't catch it. And so what happens is they reclaim it. So you're responsible for all of that out of date product. And so we could
Mhm.
have gotten out in front of that had we, really been honed in on, okay, this particular customer, he's ordering these 4 SKUs, but over the last 6 months or 4 months, whatever it was, he hasn't ordered our
Mhm.
jalapeno. What's going on here? And it's
Yeah.
like we had a broker, we have a category manager, I've got an internal team, but and
Mhm.
myself too, we didn't catch it. And then when we get
Yeah.
the bill for $5,000 or whatever that is, we're like
Yeah.
scratching our head like we need to do better. So it's really when
Yeah.
it's a trial and error, but soon as you realize you have a breach or you have an issue, you want to quickly get in and
Mhm.
figure it out and make a plan that it never happens again because
Right.
that
Yeah, you don't want to repeat mistake like that.
right. So it's just really being
Mm.
focused at every aspect. Obviously, your POs,
Yeah.
brands work hard to get those POs. So you wanna make
Mhm.
sure that they're all of those SKUs are coming through. And then
Yeah.
another don't would be, again, you work hard to get those POs. You wanna make sure you're following all the guidelines. In the beginning,
Mhm.
we were just shipping product. We didn't know stickers had to be on all 4 sides of a box. So, we get this great PO in, but then when we finally get the check, there were so many
Yeah.
deductions. And we were like, okay, we have to follow these vendor agreements. If we don't understand
Yeah.
them, we need to get out and ask questions.
Mhm.
Some are a little more lax, I would say, some warehouses and groups, but some it doesn't matter. The rules are the rules, and if you don't follow them, they'll fee you, fine you, that sort of thing.
Mhm. Yeah, and that's hard, especially if you're a new brand and don't have experience doing it to learn those lessons because they directly hit your pocketbook.
Yes,
Ho
definitely.
ho How often would you say as maybe it changed after your experience with the one retailer that you just talked about? How often do you look at your numbers to see what's shipping and moving and selling?
We monitor that, I would say daily, weekly. We
Mhm.
have must arrive by dates that the
Mhm.
product has to get, leave our facility or our consolidator by a certain date, excuse me,
Yeah.
to make it to their facility. Otherwise, we're late
Mhm.
and they'll fine us. So we want to make
Yeah.
sure that we're, super hyper focused on that and that we're
Mhm.
meeting all those objectives. So yeah, I
Yeah.
would say weekly, daily.
Yeah. Um, Talk to us just for a moment about what's your team structure to handle the different roles of the business?
We honestly run very lean.
Yeah.
Basically, there's like 4 of us. We have our
Mhm.
production side. We kind of have like an assistant, and then I have an operations manager, and she, I
Mhm.
would say, wears a lot of hats.
Yeah.
She's doing my financials, she's tracking my shipment. We did when
Mhm.
I bought the company. One of the things was I did want to work very lean for a little while
Yeah, sure.
just to kind of get a handle on things, see where we were. So I did outsource a lot. So like my social media is
Mhm.
outsourced, my freight is outsourced, that sort of thing. So
Right.
but I would definitely say we all use our time very wisely because it forces you to when you wear a lot of hats,
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
So yeah, we run very lean, but we have a very strong, I would say, internal team, and I
yeah.
do rely on our broker network also.
Mhm.
We have a really good broker network team that helps us as well.
Yeah, yeah, I think, a lot of brands are probably familiar with running lean, but, a couple episodes ago, we interviewed Will Nissa from IQ Bar, almost $100 million, and they have 6 people on their team.
Oh,
So
wow.
it's impressive how far you can get with a lean team and outsourcing strategically. So it's
I would
certainly
definitely
possible.
agree with that.
Yeah. Um, so as we kind of get to the end of our time here today, tell us. I just want to make sure we cover the product itself. What makes you different than other salsas out there? We'll start there, and then we'll get to my other question.
We produce a clean quality salsa, so I definitely think we feel like we were ahead of that trend, I
Hmm.
guess, and I don't wanna call it a trend because I feel like that's just gonna be a way with the consumer is, they're
Yeah,
reading ingredients, they want a clean label, they wanna know what's in their product, and honestly,
absolutely.
if you turn the label and read our ingredients, everything is farm fresh. We don't use preservatives, dyes. The only preservative in the salsa is vinegar, and vinegar is a natural preservative.
Yeah.
Everything else is sourced farm fresh. So we definitely have that
Hmm.
going for us. Another uniqueness is, um, you know, obviously the taste of it is very,
Hmm.
it's a very good premium taste because of what's in the ingredients, and then you can cook with it also. So
Yeah.
that's a big deal when people are wanting, something fresh to cook with instead of going to get all fresh produce, which is, produce has gotten very costly now. You can
Yes.
literally take a jar or 2 of our salsa, each one has a different flavor profile, and use it
Hmm.
pretty much in any dish. So we're
Yeah.
excited and very fortunate that it's very versatile in that respect.
Yeah. Oh, what do you like to h- use it in a recipe? Do you have one in mind that you
We
prefer?
do. So in South Louisiana, crawfish is a big deal
Mm,
here, especially
yeah.
during Lent. And so we're
Hmm.
in Lent season right now. And last week I made crawfish bread. So it's very easy.
Mm,
You take French bread, and the mixture calls for some of our salsa. So
mhm.
it's super easy. It's like 5 ingredients. You mix it all together. It's on our website. You put it on the French bread, pop it in the oven, and it's a really good appetizer, or it could even be
Hmm,
like a lunch dish.
yeah.
Another dish that I really like to use our salsa in is a chili. So in place
Mhm.
of and you can use it in place of any rotel also.
Yeah.
Whereas Rotel's like a vinegarized, processed tomato, you can, dump a jar of our salsa in any dish, but
Mhm.
I've used it in chili before and it's really good.
Yeah. Excellent. So we can all go to your website and find those recipes.
Yes, we have a ton
Yeah.
of recipes on our website.
Fantastic. All right, Denise, my last question for you today. And I think this episode has been great. There's just been packed with so much information. So I know everybody will get a lot out of it. But my last question for you is what has been your recipe to revenue?
So, the recipe to revenue is, and I know I feel like I'm probably saying this over and over again, but repeating myself. But I think the biggest thing is having confidence in your brand. You
Hmm.
have a quality brand. How are you going to portray that to not only your customer, but a category manager? So it's
Hmm.
just staying super consistent, staying loyal to your brand. Um, and then just making sure all those boxes are checked. You have a
Yeah.
quality brand, you're promoting it, you're making sure it's out in the store for the customer to buy, and then you're making sure that you educate your customer on why they need to go and buy it, and then it's
Yeah.
just being consistent with all of those boxes day after day. Obviously, it gets granular. You want to make sure, you're not getting feed to death or different things like that. But I would say when you find what works for you and what's going to turn those POs, you just keep doing that over and over again.
Yeah.
Obviously, you're learning along the way. You're checking
Mhm.
boxes, you're Xing boxes, but being consistent, I would say, is definitely the key.
Yeah. Yeah, that really helps the ability to scale. So when you have that
Yes.
system there. Well, fantastic. Thank you so much. Anywhere you want to send people to, obviously, we'll put a link to your website down in our notes below the video so
Yeah, I
people
mean,
can
we're a
check down
strong
there.
regional brand, so you can,
Mhm.
obviously find our products, of course, in Louisiana, Texas,
Mhm.
Arkansas, all the regional states that border us and beyond. We're actually exporting too, but definitely visit our website. You can buy right off of our website. We have a TikTok shop. You can access TikTok
Nice.
if you're into that. So
Mhm.
yeah, those are the places to buy it. And we just want everyone to know that we have a great quality product. Obviously, it's fun. You can, use it for parties, you can use it in your dish for cooking with your family. And it's healthy. It's a clean label.
Yeah. Fantastic. Denise, thank you for joining me today on Recipe to Revenue. Please check out Two Sisters Salsa, everyone. See
Thank
you
you so
soon.
much.
Thanks for listening to Recipe to Revenue. If you're building in the food, beverage, or hospitality space, you're in the right room. Subscribe for more founder stories and real world growth strategies. And if this episode helped, share it with a friend and leave a review. It's how this show grows. For tools, templates, and ways to work together, visit recipe2revenue.co. I'm Leah Messina. Until next time, keep cooking up the next revenue stream.